You want to take some pictures too, Ruby, of this interview when you get a chance? Okay, do it on your phone. It's like, my phone's newer than yours, Dad.
Well, and then she controls the image too.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
It is cozy. We should have books up to the ceiling at one of.
Well, we want your books
Oh,
in
I'm
this
thinking
bookstore. Yeah.
if we could have books up to the sound. I'm just talking about the sound right now. This is something
It's
very.
nice, isn't it?
So we're already live to the world.
Okay.
All right.
So I think I'll just be quiet from here on in and let you guys have a nice time.
Well,
Okay.
thank you, Eric, for inviting us into your home, your hallowed hall this morning.
It's lovely to be here.
Well, and Eric,
Also Eric.
Kid Koala, welcome. We're so happy to have you in San Francisco and at Bird and Beckett.
Yes. I've never been to this neighborhood, and this now that I know that there's a jazz club / bookstore, I'm gonna have to make a point to like get out here next time.
Well, you're always welcome.
Yeah.
And I think that the Bay Area is it's really great that you're bringing your vision of puppetry and turntabling and just like the wide soundscape that you bring the ensemble work to SF Jazz and
Yeah. It's very much a team effort. First of all, there's 15 of us on tour. I'm more just like the minister of silliness, as far as the project is concerned. But SF Jazz, we love this venue, and they've been taking a chance on booking these sort of live film shows that we're doing for years now. So it's always great to be back. Yeah.
well, they're packing the house, so clearly it's well received.
Yeah, and they're the first ones to do this double feature. So we did Newphonia Must Fall, our first show in production in this style last week for 5 shows, and then this week we're doing Storyville Mosquito for 5 shows. So, and that's the first city to ever do that. The audience has been great.
Well, I think we are eager for these kind of transmissions. First of all, I want to say that just being in the audience, I felt bathed in love. It was really a generous performance.
Thank you. Yeah.
I wanted to. I'm remarking on the way you're working with animals. And I think
not real animals, like character animals.
Right.
Although having real animals on stage, I mean, that sounds like a whole other.
Well, just that you would even consider that,
right,
is amazing, and it speaks to the wide vision. That,
right.
So you started your career out as a marsupial.
Yeah, I was DJing under the moniker Kid Koala, which I still do. That was just a nickname assigned to me from my friends from back when I first started scratching when I was 12, 13 years old. And it stuck over the years. And I would say from the late 90s to the 2010s, most of my touring life would have been DJing, scratching in hip-hop groups or playing music festivals, usually alone on stage or with a hip-hop group every now and then. But I'd say I'd probably done a couple thousand shows, just solo type shows on tour alone. This is much different. I was like having a family up there with me, 15 of us, and puppeteers and cinematographers and string quartets, etc. And so I think that energy that you're feeling at the show last night is that everybody is contributing to that, adding their spirit into that mix, and what you get is just something pretty, at least for me, it just still surprises me how much synchronicity there is on stage, and how much joy. It's a very joyful show to perform.
And it really shows. I noticed that you have that kind of entrainment, that synchronicity, with your nobody's using scores.
The strings have charts. I have a couple times just for fun taken their iPads away, and they're fine. You know what I mean? I think it's more just for the, I guess in chamber music,
You're used to it.
they're used to reading and stuff like that. But they always have to have one eye on the action that's happening. So on stage, just for context, we have 8 live cameras, we have 20 miniature sets, we have 75 puppets, and a team of 15, all activating all this time. So everything's performed, filmed, projected, scored, and foleyed in real time. And so even though the strings have their charts for each shot or each cue or sequence, they still have to keep an eye on the tempo of the acting, and sometimes we're following the puppeteers as to the pacing. And it's not like there's just one strict conductor up there that we're all kind of locking into. Depending on the shot, we have to follow different things. And over the course of touring and rehearsing, it just becomes a little bit intuitive after a while.
So you have a common text. Did you develop it together?
In terms of the story? Yeah, I think it started first with... I'd written a story and done storyboards for everything, and I covered a whole wall of our workshop, probably from maybe when I was in maybe about 10 shelves worth of distance, maybe 5 or 6 columns of storyboards, so just hundreds of them. And then I invited our cinematographer AJ Korkadakis and our set designer Corinne Merrill and also our puppet designer, Patrick Martel. And so we looked at the storyboards together, and I said, okay, well, there's a scene where the mosquito he's listening through glass, through the wall, and then, he can kind of overhear the jazz band playing on the other side of the wall, a club he wasn't allowed into because he didn't have a shirt. And there was or a jacket required. But so it would be something like that. I'd drawn it out and said, "This is what I'm thinking for this moment in the show," and then we all kind of spitball ideas of how this could be built, how this could be shot, how the camera could move, what size and scale are the puppets, etc. And so that part, that actual iteration of coming into a physical plane from the storyboards is always very collaborative. But I think the first general story started with the storyboards.
So you've made quite you spent a lot of time drawing in your life as well as turntabling.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think drawing was my first escape. Ever since I could hold a pencil or pen, that was just something I could just zone into. My parents knew this too. It was a very very handy for them. When we were out at a restaurant or something, and I was starting to get restless. Like, just give him a placemat and a pen, and we won't hear from him for a whole hour. He'll just,
Well, the ensemble work that you're doing now is kind of the opposite of being on the road by yourself.
Absolutely, yeah. It was by design. It just got it was time for to do something else. I think when you're I still, don't get me wrong, I still enjoy rocking parties and playing in that context. I just didn't want to do it all the time. So there were years I was doing maybe, over 250 cities a year just by myself.
Wow.
So I would, there's a lot of downtime because, I'd be on stage for maybe an hour and a half. There'd be a sound check, it'd be another hour, and then there'd be 22 hours left in the day where I was just wandering around cities by myself. But at the same time, I enjoyed that time. I was observing a lot. I was drawing a lot. I was writing a lot. Even in the hotels or on the trains or at the airport or whatever it was. I was always had a sketchbook, and so the first graphic novel that I'd done, Newfonia Must Fall, was whilst on tour, just in the off hours, and it just gave me something to focus on while I was doing all that sort of turntable troubadouring or whatever.
Well, yeah. I think visiting. So you hail from Montreal, right?
Montreal, yes.
Yeah. Do you did you grow up speaking different languages?
My parents spoke Cantonese in the house, but they understood English, so they would speak to us in Cantonese, and I would, my sister and I would reply in English. But so I can speak Cantonese. It's not something I get too much opportunity to do, but so those two languages I'm fluent in, I guess. And then when I moved to Montreal, then French was something that I'd learned all through school. But then once we moved to Montreal, it's a bilingual French English city. So that's
well. I guess what I'm going towards here is trying to understand more about how you create this imaginative space, and it's so interdimensional and multidimensional, and being able coming up speaking different languages. I thought
like art language. Oh, I see what you're saying. Okay, sorry, I totally misunderstood that question.
You have facility with lots of different languages in
right.
art.
I think that there's a couple of things that inspired the show that you saw last night. It goes all the way back to when I was very young. When I was 6 years old, I remember my mom one day deciding, she's like, "Hey, Eric, you and your sister, your father and I, and your grandmother are going to watch a movie together this afternoon." And I was kind of, doing my thing, playing with my toys or whatever, Lego, and not really that interested. But she said, no, you're going to like this movie. And she put a VHS tape in, and it was Charlie Chaplin's Modern Times.
Oh.
And my grandmother, who was just visiting, she didn't actually speak any English. So the fact that it was a dialogue-free film that we could all watch together and enjoy. To this day, I still don't remember ever hearing my grandmother belly laugh that much. The rest of the time she was very stoic, stately grandmother type person. But she was having a ball. Once that happens in the room, it's contagious, and so I have such a visceral fond memory of that. All three generations together, just like enjoying the same piece of work and following the story and being moved by the poignant moments and laughing together. It was kind of a little epiphany for me. I was like, when I was 6, I said, I don't know what's happening or how they made this movie, but I understand that this energy that I'm feeling in the room, just as an audience with my 3 generations of my family, I said I want to make this energy when I grow up. It was like kind of marked there that early, and then I got into became very fascinated, over time, I think, with the process of making that type of show, entertainment, film, music, whatever. Like, I just became very interested in even the mechanics of, how did Chaplin do this roller skating scene? It looks like he's gonna fall off the second mezzanine of this shop, but is that real? They overlaid a painted, piece of glass over one part of the frame, and then the camera was able to make it look like he was on the second story. And learning things like that was always a lot of fun, just learning about the mechanics of
And
that.
you reveal that, and I mean that's part of your performance is sharing
Yes.
how
Yeah.
these I hesitate to say illusions. They're more experiences.
Well,
are
it is.
generated.
It is. We're speaking, in a show like Storyville Mosquito. We're using film language. We are playing for the screen. We're trying to make a unified film up there, with all these moving parts. But I think what's fun about it is that at any point, during that story unfolding on the screen, you can look down and see the puppeteers and the camera operators and cinematographers scurrying around trying to create that scene live. So you get to see under the hood. You have the making of and the final product at the same time, and it's up to the audience to choose if they even want to bother with figuring out how it's working. But I think that's part of the fun of it. I think in this day and age, people are kind of used to having a couple maybe windows open on their computer or this, and have the bandwidth to kind of process those things simultaneously. But for instance, at one point he's like, "Oh, I really like how realistic the snow feels in this." How are they doing that? Oh, it's just somebody shaking some potato flakes over the set, or what, and those moments it's kind of joyful to just have that little light bulb, being like, oh yeah, I got to complete that equation with the process, So by design, these shows are meant to give the audience access to how we're doing every scene,
It reminds me of the kind of magic that happens with like Balinese theater, where you see the puppeteer is working, but you can see behind the screen, and you see the orchestra working at the same time, and it's kind of brings you into the story more.
Oh, absolutely. I think so. I think people can feel that, the urgency of like, all these parts are moving because there's a human engine behind it, or several humans like pushing it along. And I think that was again by design. I've been on tours where it's okay, we all have to play to a click track or something like this so that it synchronizes with the visuals. I've done those types of shows before, but for these shows I just wanted it to be kind of free, open, so in cases where like we have the freedom and the agency to actually work with tempos and moods, and if the audience is really going for a bit, then I'm like, hey, let's just keep it going and see how big we can make it here. And so that keeps it exciting for us too as performers. It's not just like exactly the same every night,
Well, it definitely it's coming off as live action, and there's also that. It's interesting that you mentioned Chaplin, because I also had the sensation of going to the silent movie and having the pianist or the organist or accompanying it, and I know that's a tradition as well.
Absolutely, yeah.
The strings are so warm.
They're
in the
great.
Work.
They're great. And I think that was it. Like live scoring a film, is absolutely like you're reacting to everything you're seeing, and in some moments that's what the musical component on the stage is doing. We're reacting to the action that's seeing there. But I think what we also appreciate is that we could affect actually the action and the tempo too, right? So that's what it's like. It's not like, oh, the film's locked and then we just play to it. It's like, oh no, like if we play slower, then the puppeteers have to move slow. There's definitely a bit of a dialogue happening the whole time.
Yeah, it was really breathing. I love that. And I also really was interested in your selection of characters.
Okay.
So you don't anthropomorphize your insects.
Yeah.
But they really have personalities like real animals do.
Absolutely.
You don't give them human voices.
So yeah, I mean, my fascination with bugs, I guess, comes from also when I was a really young child. We didn't have pets. My parents weren't really into the idea or didn't have the bandwidth to also have, say, a dog or something like that in the house. So I was spent a lot of time in the backyard, just sort of in the garden and poking around and flipping rocks over and watching ants and centipedes and things like that. And so they were alive. They were kind of my first pets, or just the idea, just this intrigue of those creatures. And as I was drawing, I would always like to draw, well, two things that are still kind of big themes, I guess, running themes. I work with robots or something. I'd always like to draw spaceships, but I would say mainly it's robots and bugs. I would just love drawing bugs, beetles, scorpions, spiders, all of those types of things. So when it came time to cast this story, I decided to take that that angle on it, really, but make them hopefully more appealing from a puppet perspective. They're not that very realistic looking, but they have a charm to them, I hope.
Well, they definitely are charming, and in fact, I mean, mosquitoes are kind of demonized. And,
absolutely.
And so the fact that you make us love these characters, they're, also from the perspective of the performance and the music, having jazz be a character in your story, it seems like the villain in the story, the spider is one thing, but it's more virtuosity is the villain.
Oh, that's an interesting way to look at it. No, I'm not against virtuosity at anyone. I don't think I do like bebop also. If we're gonna just use jazz terms, I think this was more a little bit of a personal story in terms of the mosquito, moves to the city from, a small country town, and then tries to join this orchestra. But he's a bit of an outsider, and as far as technical proficiency on his instrument, he doesn't. He's not a shredder or anything like that, but
he's got heart.
He does. He plays sort of intentional notes, and he does it with a lot of feeling. And in the story, it kind of reaches he finds an audience of just the little creatures that live in the city, like the squirrels and the moles and pigeons and stuff that come around and listen to him. And so he finds a bit of a small community audience there. But then realizing that when he had to audition for the orchestra, the standards much higher, and so
plus you have to have the look.
Well, the tarantula who plays the vibraphone. Yeah, I don't. He is a villain in a sense, but actually, I think I wasn't really, I wasn't really trying to poke fun at it. It's like, oh, more notes and faster is what it's about. It's a little bit more. Yeah, he had more confidence, I guess, and he's more swag and command of his instrument also, and even the vibraphone versus a clarinet. I mean, it's a polyphonic instrument, so you can make chords and things that are just impossible. So it was one of those things where it was just this mosquito, as a bit of an outsider, was just feeling kind of overwhelmed, like, oh, maybe I don't have what it takes to get here, or I don't have the tools or the agency to do it. And I think through the story, it's just a bit of an underdog story at first.
Yeah.
But really, he still has this great admiration and passion for the music. And
Well,
you
well,
know.
maybe instead of virtuosity, I would say gatekeeping.
Yeah, there's a bit of that. Yeah, for sure.
You know, that keeps maybe people who don't grow up being able to afford instruments
Yeah. Yeah.
out of the conversation.
Yeah, and there's a bit of a semi-autobiographical thing kind of seated in this story, which over the course of the years that it took from the first drawing of the mosquito to now in the show, I think I drew the mosquito in 2003, right after Newphonia was published. I started, sketching this little mosquito character, and there were weird things happening in my real life, like parallel to this story. But I grew up with my father always playing jazz and classical records in the house. One of which was Sweet Emma's Preservation Hall album, and which incidentally the first song of which is Basin Street Blues. So this is a record that was always playing in the house, and at the time, I grew up in Vancouver, British Columbia as a child, and so you couldn't really get further from New Orleans as far as
Yeah,
on the continent.
Yeah.
And but that said, like, that music was just always playing, and it to me, even I put it on and it feels like I'm home, like in my childhood home. And so somehow it just got into my bloodstream, so to speak, just from hearing it so much. And then I remember after college when I'd signed my first record contract and I'm starting to tour around the world, my father said, "Hey, if you ever get to go to tour through New Orleans, like, book some time off and just spend some time just going to see the bands there." And my father, he's quite a quiet man in general, but so I do listen when he starts to. I have a little like nugget of wisdom for you, and I asked him why, and he said that when he was in college, he took a sort of he was again like a huge fan of jazz music, just listening and buying records and stuff, but when he was in college, he took a trip down to New Orleans and he went to see all the bands there, and Pres Hall, which I don't think has changed since the 50s as far as the actual room. There's all these amazing, musical ghosts and legends and mojo there. And so that record that I grew up listening to, he got from that trip, and he told me, he was like, that really was a paradigm shift for him. It was like a spiritual experience to see and hear that music being played live. And so on I think it was my first album at the tail end of Carpal Tunnel Syndrome, I was doing a tour, and I had a gig at I think House of Blues or something in New Orleans, and then I did what my dad said. I took a week off, and I just hung out in New Orleans and went to see as many bands as I could. And I went to Preservation Hall, where my dad went like a couple decades before. And it looked like it probably hadn't changed. I mean, I love the fact that there was no amplifiers or microphones or anything. Just musicians breathing into their instruments, like very much like this situation here. It's acoustically, you're just sharing that space and that music, and yeah, I was deeply moved by it. And they played Basin Street Blues, which just triggered everything all the way back to childhood for me. And I continued to go to different jazz clubs and for the rest of the week, and I noticed that every band played Basin Street Blues at one point during their set. So I was at the airport going to fly home, and just that music ringing in my head from a week of just experiencing it live and being really moved by it. And I said, look, I don't know what my next album's going to sound like, but I'm going to start with a turntable version of Basin Street Blues.
Ah,
And so
interesting.
that's all it took. Like my real life experience is like, I'm gonna go do this. And so I got home and I immediately like started recording a version of Basin Street Blues. And I will say, I'll be the first to admit it's not actual jazz version, because to me jazz is played live by a bunch of people playing off of each other, in real time. But it was just me, so it was more like a study, and I did, the chord cycles were laid out, and then I remember, trying to find a long note, a held sustained note, like off a classical record of a clarinet or something, and then I put that on the turntable and I bent it into the Basin Street Blues melody, or just play around the chords, and then I would scratch in, every hit of the upright bass. Yeah, so it was like a kind of a laboratory version. It took me weeks to finish this version, but in the end, like what you'll hear is, every instrument is played on turntables, just one note off one sound, like maybe an upright bass, like boom, and then bent on the turntable and scratched to do the walking bass line. And it took me just weeks to just even learn how to do that physically, but then to arrange every layer of, the trombone and the clarinet and what have you, just have them like play around without it landing on the same note, just kind of staying out of each other's way,
Yeah.
As you would hear a jazz ensemble do if they're improvising. So I finished that track, and then my cousin, his name, he goes by Monkmas. He did this beautiful animated video for it, and I just put that on YouTube. It was part of the release of the album. And several months later, I get a call from Preservation Hall, which was very I didn't believe it when my manager said, we just got a call from the musical director at Preservation Hall, Ben Jaffe, and he wants to invite you down to play at Preservation Hall. And I said, what are you talking about? It's Preservation Hall. It's trad jazz. What's that got to do with turntables? And he wants to speak to you on the phone. And so I call. I'm like, hey, it's great to meet you. And I'm honored, but I was kind of fighting it as an idea. I felt like very much an outsider, because I was like, I'm a scratch DJ. I've been doing it since I was 12. I practice it every day. That's the thing. But I'll be the first to admit this is not a jazz version. This is a turntable study of that. But regardless, he said, no, but I think that you've touched on something that's very like core. Just even in the video that my cousin made, and the style of music, and the style of the phrases and voices. He heard something. He's like, "There's a kinship here, and I want you to bring it down to the hall and just show people how you do it, right?" So I was just pinching myself the whole time. Like, I couldn't believe it. I called my dad. I said, I got invited to play at Preservation Hall. And he's like, what? and we went down as myself, my wife, my manager, and we went down to the hall, and they had set up this little pull down, like a slide projector screen for home movies or something. And I said, what's that doing there? He's like, oh, we want to show your video to start this set. And I said, what? And they start playing my cousin's animated video, and I'm watching it, and it's full. It's a full house. By that I mean, I think there's 80 people or something in there, and they're watching this version of Basin Street Blues, and I'm like, oh, this is just cool that it's here. And then at the tail end of the video, the band start walking in, and they are playing over my version.
Far out.
And they take it up. They continue it. I was literally just crying.
No doubt. Yeah.
I was just like, can't even believe this is happening. And then so they invited me on stage to play with them. And they were doing, a lot of standards or something. Like, I'll go over it, rocking chair and whatever key. And then 3, 4, and then you're on,
Yeah.
But I knew all the tunes, and I was just sort of trying to keep up with them really. So that, to me, the story of a mosquito has a bit of that. Like you're just trying to keep up with these super heavies, and I remember just trading bars with Charlie Gabriel, and it's like you sort of throw something at me and I'd have to respond or try to at least match what he's doing on the turntable. And I remember just in 32 bars, like literally learning more about music, live music, playing live music than I had from 10 years of just DJing alone on stage. There was this whoa, moment, and I remembered even before we got on stage, I asked the guys, like, were you guys like super nervous the first time you had to play here? Because I generally was more nervous for that show than any other show up until that point. And I'd opened for rock bands and arena shows and stuff like that, but Press Hall, like I said, just look at the history and my father and that record. Stakes were really high for me. So I asked them, were you ever nervous to play here? And they said, are you kidding? Like, this is New Orleans. Like, the moment you can blow a whistle, you're in the marching band, And that was a, mind expanding moment for me, because I'd grown up in classical piano, where it was a little bit more about adjudicated exams and competitions and recitals, and everything was just, you have to do it exactly right, and it's always like there's a winner or something at the end of the so I was brought in pretty strict classical sense, and then I went from that to DJing, scratch DJing, which was also battle based. Like a lot of the times you had a chance to scratch in front of a crowd would be at a DJ battle. Of course there was a competition, you're trying to outshine them. I know in jazz there's the cutting sessions too, but it's all still, you're playing a song together. It's not like just you and then just me and then there's judges, and so just being with them that week and just learning about how music is just a part of the community and culture. It's like your job is, there's always going to be people better than you, there's always going to be people just coming up under you that don't know as much, and your job is really to just tie that, learn from the musicians that come before you, add your twist into it, and then pass that on to the next generation when you move through life. And that was, to me, like just so liberating an idea.
And on with the tradition of jazz. I mean, I think you've made space for more different kinds of expression, but it's all jazz.
I think so. I mean, from the idea of like our shows, they're not improvised like just from scratch. We know the story we're trying to tell up there together as a group of, but it is a bit like being in an audio-visual jazz band. We all have to be there in the moment and trying to make every scene funnier if it's a comedic scene, more poignant if it's a tender scene, more adrenaline, high octane fueled if it's one of the chase sequences or something in the third act. All those things, we're playing together up there. So I don't know if I'd call it jazz, but I would say, I do think it's akin to us being like in a band. Only some of us don't play instruments. Some of us are on the visual side. So it's an audio-visual band, I guess. Yeah.
Well, an audio-visual band. The expanding these definitions is, I think, really key to making sure that we're connecting the generations and keeping everything going.
Yeah, and I think hearing the laughter last night during the show, you could hear every now and then you'll hear a really young child or something like really get all chuckly about one, slapstick moment or something, or then something happens, more on the dramatic high level side, and maybe the kids don't understand so much the subtext of that scene, but you hear the parents kind of like, oh, have the empathy moment, and the response there, and you even hear like sniffles sometimes. I think I heard last night, people were actually tearing up for a couple moments too. It was pin drop quiet in the theater, and I think that's the dynamics of that. I just love. It's very different from trying to get like keep a dance floor going
Right.
or break dance site for moving. It's like this is a yeah. It's kind of a all my favorite worlds colliding, I guess, because there's still the DJ element, there's still the storytelling element, but then there's the sets and the camera work. So everything I love about film and even just visual art is kind of represented there on stage from this team. So I think that's what's joyous about it for me.
I saw a lot of signatures. Speaking of sets, you brought in elements of San Francisco.
Oh yes,
and,
yeah,
and it almost like there, and it made a connection with people. I think.
Yeah.
I noticed that. So you have a new work coming out soon. You said you're going to go on the road with it in 2 years.
Yeah, we're just prototyping early puppets and set ideas for it. It's called Creatures of the Late Afternoon. It's based on my latest album, and the premise is there's a group of endangered species, animals, that are banding together to try to save the Natural History Museum through the power of music. But in terms of genre of film, if we're speaking in film language, it's going to be it's still a love story. I don't know. I was raised on that. My mom would always just show it's movie night, and there'd always be some sort of warmth to the types of films that she would choose to show us. So I was kind of raised on a steady diet of that growing up. But I think the genre in terms of style will be more action, like an action film. So some of the tropes that everyone knows from action films, we're figuring out right now. Okay, how can we do that but completely live, practically, one take? No, with the puppets. How do we scale them? How do we, put them in the frame? What's up with the lighting? How do we get certain ultra dynamic action sequence with the camera work? And so that is again just kind of pushing us to stretch what we've learned from even these first two productions to continue seeing what else is possible there.
Well, you were describing your board game as going from place to place.
Yeah.
maybe your bus will visit Bert and Beckett.
Absolutely, they would love it here. The team would love. They're all avid readers, and this looks amazing. Yeah, this would be a dream for them as a extracurricular tour activity. Come on out here and see some music.
Everyone's always welcome, of course.
Yes.
And we love the cosmopolitan feel. Lots of people come through here.
Great.
I wonder, I'm thinking about your just like your profile in the world of music, and I'm sure you don't really consider it that much in that way. You're a very modest person, clearly.
Profile.
Well, just like how you
No.
yeah, sure. But I was thinking about Rahsaan Roland Kirk. And how he talked about journey agents, about New Eulipians, and
you're gonna have to enlighten me on it. I know his music, obviously.
Well,
but
he talked about journey agents, musicians traveling from place to place, opening portals and inviting people through them.
Wow. Okay.
And he did that with sound a lot himself.
Yeah.
But I just wonder, I'd like to invite you to sort of open the portal and say whatever you'd like to say to the New Eulipians in the world.
Oh wow, that's a doozy of a let me
I mean,
think.
you may. I think you clearly do that with your work already in so many different ways. But you're seeing the world in different cities.
Yes.
Do you can you give us some observations as a troubadour? You mentioned yourself in that way, like
Well,
all these different places that you visit.
I think what I've learned from especially these shows, these live film shows, and I guess there's a bit of, we always say it's a hi-fi, lo-fi show. Yes, there's tons of cabling and cameras and lights and little miniature sets and all kinds of gear on stage, but it's also very lo-fi. It's very simple. Like if you think about puppetry, that's one of the oldest forms of entertainment. Really, even shadow puppetry. I mean, we can go all the way back, not just within people's life experience. I think everybody remembered your kindergarten teacher like making finger puppets with you and you doing a show and stuff. But I think there was just with this combination of things. I think with film, with puppetry, with chamber music, the strings, with the DJ element and piano scoring, I think there was just a lot of my favorite universes colliding on stage. But then also, I think underneath it all is this hi-fi, lo-fi show that's very much human engined, So if the humans on stage stop, the show stops. And I think there's very much like a celebration of that, in a world that's just getting more and more automated as we move forward. I think for us, just even from a performance perspective, it's like everybody has to multitask and do all these things, and that's actually the fun challenge about it. It's not like, oh, we hit space bar and then we just let all the pre-programmed stuff happen.
Right.
No, so I think for me, I think what I've learned just touring this show is no matter where we go, maybe because it's dialogue free, generally speaking, at the response from the audience, it doesn't matter if we're in Abu Dhabi or Tokyo or Santiago or somewhere in North America. There's underneath it all sort of the same questions and the same universal, hopefully, themes that are resonating with audience around the world. So to me, the connectivity of it is like, that's sort of a nice validation to know that, okay, well, here's this motley crew of kids up in Montreal, making this live art project, and then when we get to bring it to other communities and cultures and share it with them, and then have them respond and enjoy, seeing the process, but also, well, at least from what they tell me after the show is, genuinely being kind of moved by the work. It just makes it all, closes the loop. It makes it all worthwhile. The effort that we put into it it pays off when you say, oh, people are actually enjoying all the detail that we put into making this show happen. And so I think as far as portals and stuff, I think the feedback that we get a lot from this show is that, like, people will tell us, I've never seen anything like this live, but it made me feel like a kid again, or, once I realized what was happening, like in the show, like in the first 5 minutes, like I didn't want this to end. It was just this. They just got brought into a little bit of the magic, if you will, of all these moving parts, like working like harmoniously together to tell this story. And again, it's a joyful thing for me. I would say it's akin to 15 of us on one surfboard, and it can be very thrilling, and we're always on the verge of wiping out. But that in itself is kind of the beautiful challenge with each performance. Is just like, how do we keep this thing balanced and keep the story, moving forward, with all these moving parts. And I think if we can show that we could do that even with the context of a live show, then maybe from a more expanded level, just as a planet, maybe hopefully, the possibility is there that all these moving parts and all these people from different places or disciplines or philosophies there's still a balance, that is possible. I think, not to get too new age about it, but I would say that would be the closest takeaway.
We're in San Francisco.
Oh, right. Yeah. Right on brand. Yeah.
Well, I just want to thank you so much
Thank you for having me.
Creating that imaginative space and bringing it to us. And
it's a team effort, like I said. I'm just the minister of silliness. I'll push it along, but I'm glad I found a team of people that are up for this adventure, and audiences that are also, interested in seeing it.
Well, we received your transmission of love. Thank you very much. And we look forward to the next iteration.
Yes.
Please keep us on your map here
Absolutely.
at Bird and Beckett. And
yes.
We look forward to talking with you again whenever you want.
Great. I'll bring some of the crew with me next time, like the puppeteers or something. They're very insightful also with their understanding of the universe through puppetry. It's different. I understand the world through records. I actually do. I've spent so much time with actual records and practicing and scratching them, playing them, listening to them, that my brain's synapses are all kind of wired around this logic of even in one's lifetime, as you get closer to the end of the record,
yes,
everything, the actual distance that the needle travels is farther at the outside of the record than inside of the record. So even as you go through life, you might be going slower technically. The speed of the turntable is always the same, but you're getting slower in terms of the distance you're walking. But you can still, obviously, it's kind of corny, but at the same time, it's actually how I understand. It's you still have the ability to express something, and often even in records, I think from a physical standpoint, the closer you got to the end of the record, it can't handle loud dynamics. It'll skip the needle or it'll distort. So often they would cut more what would you call it, acoustic or quieter songs near the end. But sometimes, to me, those were always the songs that hit me the hardest, emotionally. So as far as these shows are concerned, yes, we're not in the loud, nightclubby moments of my touring career. We're maybe trying to find a space where, we can touch more the emotional side of live performance and stuff. So that's where we're at least this team, trying to make these live films happen for audiences.
Well, it's brilliant work, Eric, and we love seeing you and meeting you, and thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
And thank you to Bird and Beckett for having us today. We really appreciate all of you out there.
Yeah. Awesome. I think the record is the portal. The record might be